Good morning, good afternoon, depending where you are in space and time. First, I want to acknowledge how lucky we are to be here and to have this practice. And I want to thank Tanto Tim for inviting me to give this talk, to offer this talk, and Abba David, and of course my teacher, Rinzo Ed Sadison. Thank you for your years of very compassionate and loving guidance throughout the path. And this is a special talk, but at least a special talk to me, because this is the first talk that I'm giving after going through a process that's known as Dharma transmission, or at least the first talk that I'm giving here at City Center. I've been giving other talks in Spanish to Spanish-speaking Sangha. It's interesting, for those who don't know or are not sure what this Dharma transmission process means or is, it's a moment in time that may happen in practice where after being ordained a priest, and then after some years, maybe you get to be head priest or head monk, Shuso. And after being head monk, Shuso, it might come a time where your teacher feels that your mutual understanding of the Dharma, it's at a place where you can receive this Dharma transmission. And then in a pretty complex ceremony that takes actually 3 weeks, it's a very long process, you get to receive the full lineage of the ancestors and become a holder of that lineage. It's what we also know sometimes as full ordination. Yes, and it's very, very meaningful, and it's very important in our tradition. And now I'll get deeper into that later. So how do I got to that place? I think it's relevant. So I'm going to give some context, a bit of a story of my life that brought me to this point. Maybe a small way seeking mind of sorts. My name is Sozan. I'm a teacher residing here in the San Francisco Zen Center City Center. And I was born in Argentina. I was born in Argentina in 1972, in Buenos Aires. Studied, went to school, studied. I'm the older of 3 siblings. And at one point, my quest for spirituality took me to a Catholic practice. I was very Catholic for a number of years. And that's very common in South America. Most of the countries are very Catholic. So that didn't last beyond my 22 or 23rd birthday. So I was at that time working in advertising. I worked in marketing, then in advertising. I founded an advertising company. And it was because of high stress that started taking a toll on my body that I went to an osteopath. And the osteopath said, well, maybe you should meditate. I said, I don't know, maybe. He said, well, we have a group. And this group was a Soto Zen group, our school of Zen. And that's how in mid-2000s I started meditating and started practicing Zen in a different lineage of a teacher that was called Taisen Deshimaru. Taisen Deshimaru, kind of a similar story to Suzuki Roshi, but in Europe. Taisen Deshimaru went to France, actually, the same way Suzuki Roshi came here to California. He went to France and started this lineage. That's a lineage that's pretty widespread in South America. So I started practicing in that lineage. And it's interesting because when that's all you know, that's all you have, right? And I kept practicing, and it was part of my week, going to Zazen, working, talking to members of the Sangha. And then in 2013, that was more or less a decade after I started practicing, I got married again. And as part of our honeymoon, we came to San Francisco. In coming to San Francisco, I decided to come to the Saturday morning program, kind of what we're doing now, but 2013, 11 years ago. I had read Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, probably one of the big pathways towards our centers here. I didn't know what to expect, but honestly, that morning program completely changed my life in a way at that moment I didn't know was the case. But it did completely change my life and the course of my life. I heard a Dharma talk. I think it was Paul Haller that gave the Dharma talk. Had tea, cookies, talked to people. And something felt very different, very close. In a very weird way, I felt at home. I was very far away from home, but I felt at home. So I went back to Argentina with a strange feeling of, I was a bit disoriented. Like, what happened here? Went back, and my practice in Argentina, the flavor of that practice, of the Deshimaru practice, is very different to the flavor of the practice we have here, Suzuki Roshi's way of practice. And one thing that I would say that touched me was a warm feeling of the way we practice here, warm heart to warm heart. People talked to you and smiled and didn't hit you with a stick, and it was great. So, I went back to my practice, and I wanted more of that. I wanted that thing that I couldn't put my finger on that happened at San Francisco. And honestly, I couldn't find it. I had conversations with my teacher there and then, and also there was a sense of this is how we do things here, and that's how they do things there. So, I say, well, but can we merge? And it didn't work. So, because I had opened as part of my advertising company, an office in Mexico City. At that time, we had offices in Barcelona, now in Mexico City. Every time I went to Mexico that year, I came back here for a couple of days, 2013. And then came back, stayed a while, went back to Argentina. By 2014, this became too important, too strong, what was going on here. And I decided to do my first practice period here at City Center in 2014. So here's the plan. I go to the US, I do a 3-month practice period, I become Buddha or Dogen, go back, and then, start something. So I did. And that didn't happen. There was something deep going on that I couldn't really understand, at least rationally. Something very, very deep. And I could see that in the teachers here. I think that's an important part. It's not something that was said necessarily. It was something I could perceive or see. There was a depth in the way teachers spoke, moved, relate. And you could see the effect on that of that on the Sangha as well. So there was something deep going on. And that's, I guess, when I decided I wanted to go deep. But going deep meant change, big change. So I had to do something about my life, and I decided that if I wanted to go deep, I had to actually come here, stay here, practice hard, sit a lot of zazen, talk to many teachers, and maybe eventually become a teacher myself. And maybe eventually be able to express this practice in Spanish, which was important to me. It still is important to me. So I left my company, just left it, left my country, didn't leave my wife, there she is, and came here 10 years ago. With this understanding that this depth was important, going deep was relevant, was meaningful. And I was coming from a place in South America where we're not that lucky of having that many teachers and that sense of depth or lineage that I could feel here. There is, I just described Dharma transmission. There are not that many teachers with Dharma transmission. So what happens is, instead of going deep, it just replicates the best way it can. This is not criticism, it's just what it is. So there are people teaching and doing the best they can, but without Dharma transmission, without that sense of death. And this is what I want to really talk about today, because I discovered during the Dharma transmission process that there was a very important teaching of what was expressed to me as the vertical and the horizontal aspects of our practice. And this is I'm still reflecting upon this. I guess I'll be reflecting on this for forever, but it's so powerful. It's so powerful and so important. There's a vertical aspect of the transmission of the Dharma and of our practice, and there's an horizontal aspect of our practice and the transmission of the Dharma. It's going deep and going wide. And how important both are. It's not, probably many of us think, oh, deep is great. Like, yeah, but no, deep and wide are very, very important. And every aspect of our practice in both directions is really, really important. And it's really important that they are balanced, that there's a balance between the vertical and a balance with the horizontal. The oral transmission that comes from the Buddha states that the Dharma goes or extends horizontally in the 10 directions and vertically in the 3 periods or 3 times. You know, when we chant all Buddha's 10 directions 3 times, well, that's vertical and horizontal according to the teachings of the Buddha. 3 times is past, present, and future. It's the verticality of time. And 10 directions is this horizontal aspects that reaches everywhere. The 10 directions, there's no direction where it doesn't reach. So this 3 times is vertical, and this 10 directions is a teaching of of the Buddha in regards to this. So the Dharma is transmitted in time from past to present, from present to the future. And then it's being spread everywhere. Does it start to make sense? Because it has its nuances, right? It's interesting, and yet it takes, as I say, quite a lot of reflection. And back to my Catholic first incursion in spirituality, I actually feel or think that, and this happens a lot, that many different religions, traditions talk about similar things in a different way. And this vertical and horizontal, I feel I can totally connect with the sign of the cross. And, when you do the sign of the cross, or when the priest does the sign of a cross, and Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. That's how they do it. Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. Father, Son, it's vertical. And this is what's happening in the vertical sense of the Dharma transmission. And we'll talk a bit more about this, from the Buddha to Mahapajapa, and then from ancestor to our days. That's a vertical transmission. And that's what I saw in regards to the Catholic cross, Father, Son. And then the Holy Ghost, I was taught there and then that it was all pervading. The Holy Ghost is everywhere. And that's exactly what the Buddha is talking about. Yes, this linear, vertical in time, and these 10 directions. The Dharma expands in the way maybe Catholics relate to the Holy Ghost. And this was really interesting to me. It's that, okay, the Buddha, the Dharma, the Holy Ghost, there's something very, very meaningful there. So this vertical aspect of our practice has a lot to do with this transmission from the Buddha to our days through all our ancestors. And yet, in every point of the way, the Dharma is expressed horizontally. In every point of the way, in every point of that transmission, the Dharma is all-pervading. So the vertical emphasizes the lineage. The lineage. An unbroken chain of teachers and disciples from the Buddha. And the horizontal part reflects the transmission on community, on Sangha, on how teachings just are spread within and with every one of us, from one practitioner, from one being to another being. Tenshin Reb Anderson said the following when he was talking about vertical and horizontal. He said, vertical succession is honoring tradition, the way of past Buddhas and ancestors, with the intention to carry the lineage into the future. This is emphasizing the conservative and stable aspect of lineage. One must be clearly devoted to tradition in order to change it in beneficial ways. Once I heard here something that I keep very close to my heart, and I feel it's very clear in its meaning. where tradition is tending to the fire, not worshipping the ashes. Love that. And this is, I guess, what Tenzin Reb Anderson is saying about this vertical, which is honoring tradition. And that we need to understand tradition in order to adapt, change tradition in a beneficial way. Because then he continues, horizontal succession is expressing an appropriate response in the present moment. So the ways in which we express that tradition in the present moment appropriately, upaya, skillful means, that's the horizontal. So maybe another way of understanding vertical and horizontal is tradition and adaptation, or tradition and response. Tradition, the vertical, adaptation, response in the horizontal. And this teaching comes, of the vertical and horizontal, comes from centuries ago, from Dogen, from before Dogen. And we chant our ancestors here in many of our weekly ceremonies. We chant every name of the ancestors, from the Buddha, in our case, up to Suzuki Roshi. And that's a big part of the Dharma transmission process. As an essential part is just acknowledging and writing down, actually in a piece of white silk, every one of these teachers, how it came from the Buddha, in this case, to my teacher, and then to me. And Keisan Yokin, for those who don't know who Keisan Yokin is, so our school of Zen, it's the Soto School of Zen, was founded basically by two teachers. Eihei Dogen was born in the year 1200, and then a few generations after that by Keisan Yokin. And Keisan Yokin, and they had two main temples, Eihei-ji and Soji-ji, which are still there today. And you might maybe have heard about them. And Keisan Yokin wrote a very important book in our practice called the Denkoroku, which means the transmission of the light. And in this book, Keisan Yokin describes or tells the story of the transmission from teacher to teacher to teacher, from the Buddha up to his teacher. And there's a teaching in each of these stories, a koan in each of these stories. It's a very, very deep and meaningful book, and I would encourage you, if you have the time or if you want to read it. And there is something in that book that I would like to read that's part of the introduction, and that really shows or sheds light to what I'm saying right now. Listen to this. It's part of the introduction, as I've said. It says, the record of transmitting the light is a type of literature that can be called spiritual genealogy. Like ordinary genealogies, it traces a history of a family, locating its origins in some ancestor long ago and tracing that ancestor's descendants down through the successive generations to the present. This accomplishes several goals that are important for the family. It provides the panoramic view of the continuity of a line rooted in distant antiquity. It records the exploits and special distinctions of each generation. It provides a basis for family pride and style, and perhaps most important, it provides a strong sense of family identity. Together, these things create a sense of rootedness as well as continuity and identity through history. It provides a basis for family pride and style. That's exactly what I felt when I came here that time in 2013. And that's the importance of understanding this vertical aspect, because it talks about our family of Zen, our family of practice. And in understanding and connecting to that family pride then reflects in the horizontal aspect, in the way we transmit our practice to others, in the way we fulfill our vows, in the way we save all beings, in the way we move through life, actually. So, in understanding that and looking, so I got curious, right? And I started thinking, okay, where else is this reflected in our practice? In this horizontal and vertical. And I discovered that another place that I feel this is actually very, very present, it's in our robes, in sewing our Buddha's robes. And there is this vertical aspect that we call jo, which for those of you who have sewn a rakusu or an okesa, like the Buddha's robe, the small bib-like that you can see around, or this bigger one, there's first you sew vertical stripes, and then you join them together horizontally. And there is something that talks to me about this aspect of vertical and horizontal in our practice, in looking at or seeing our Buddha's robes. So you can see that this vertical and horizontal is present in many ways in places that we maybe were not so aware of. And the invitation is for you to bring this to your practice and start seeing how this vertical, traditional time aspect of your practice relates to your horizontal, everyday life aspect of your practice. Again, equally important. Tradition and adaptation. Time and space. Depth and breadth. Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And I say they're both important, and because they are equally important, what really the matter here is they need to be in balance. Vertical and horizontal need to be in balance. When it's only just tradition and there's no expression, something is lost. When there's just sideways and there's no family sense, no tradition, no positioning in present and future and past, something is also lost. And Dogen was very, very clear about this. Dogen, when he comes back from China to Japan, they asked Dogen, okay, what did you learn? You went to China, you came back, what did you learn? And he said, empty-handed, knowing nothing more, that the eyes are horizontal and the nose is vertical. That's all he said. So there you go, right? And maybe he was talking about Zazen posture, or maybe not. Or maybe it's just Dogen giving us a teaching inside a teaching, which is very Dogen. But clearly there's something here. And actually, I think he's saying that the important thing here is to see things as they really are, seeing reality as it is, in both this vertical and horizontal aspects of our practice. So it's probably something to keep thinking about. And then in the minutes that I have left, so I could talk more about these aspects, but I think this is pretty clear. Let's leave it at that. There's a vertical and a horizontal aspect of our practice, and the vertical is that the family style, it's the tradition, it's past, present, and future, and the horizontal is a family itself. It's Sangha. It's practice in everyday life. It's our vows. It's where the rock hits the water. It's a ripple effect. I guess that's a good analogy. So if the rock, there's no vertical, there's not that much of a ripple effect. Right? When there's a strong vertical, the ripple effect is maybe endless. So I would like to say a few words on how I see this being reflected in the world today. As I said, I think it's important to understand that they're both important and that the main thing here is balance. I do not feel right now this is balanced, the vertical and the horizontal. And this lack of balance between the deep and the wide, the vertical and the horizontal, probably creates a lot of suffering. And I know what I think it does. And you can see it in many ways. Even when we talk about family, I think in that basic aspect of the vertical. And maybe this is, I'm talking about the world around me, right? This is in other cultures, this is more established. But I feel we don't have very much of a vertical regarding family. We don't honor our ancestors as many other cultures do, or as we do here in our practice. And this is important. This talks about who we are now in this cross of the vertical and the horizontal. So maybe we could explore more that vertical in our lives. And also there is something about the vertical that means the deep part and the wide part that connects, or we can see reflected even in our attention, even in the way we pay attention to the moment. A big part of our practice. Nobel Prize Richard Feynman said, "Everything is interesting if you go into it deep enough." And no wonder we're so bored, because nowadays we tend not to go deep. And of course, this is in many ways is by design. Hey, I'm a former advertiser, so attention is spread, and we rather read a few notes or a paragraph and not read a book so much. And short format video is so much more successful nowadays than a long movie. Yes, there's something about that depth that we should be looking at, I think, in our practice. And then you see it in other aspects, like nowadays people don't stay put anywhere for a very long time. I'm generalizing, right? This is not always the case. I'm just talking in general terms. And even in companies, people stay maybe a few years and then move. And I have nothing against, doing what's, maximize your talent and your earnings. That's fine. But something is lost in that lack of balance. Sometimes we call it tribal knowledge. That person has been there for 10 years, 15 years. And there's something that there's no workshop or reading of the organizations, manuals that will bring. This is time. This is time. Remember the Buddha was saying, past, present, and future, vertical, time. That loss of tribal knowledge is affects. And that's the way it is, and that's fine. But we need to acknowledge that this is happening. Heck, we can see it in the Zen centers. We can see it here. There's very few people staying 5 years or more studying Zen in the same place. There was not so much the case before, but it is now. And this has an effect. We lose that tribal knowledge. We lose that sense of continuity through time. That being rooted in tradition. That's something that I felt when I came here. So this is important to acknowledge, because spread leads the way nowadays, and the vertical, the depth is potentially relegated to something we don't have time for. Time. I keep repeating that same word. And this is why I felt this teaching that I received during this Dharma transmission process was so important, and I wanted to share it with you. Because this is the tip of the iceberg, what we are talking about here today. There's so much more for each of you to investigate, to reflect, to talk to others about on these aspects of life. I keep doing this, I feel like my priest, Catholic. Sorry. But yeah, just keep investigating, because this it's important, and at least it happened to me as I kept going deeper in the vertical, I could see the effects on the horizontal, and it just becomes more and more profound. We need that ripple effect, but we need a sense of family, and we need to be sure we connect with our family of practice, and that in that connection we are able to share it with the rest of the beings. Being strong in that center where the vertical and the horizontal meets. Doing it again. There's strength in balance. There's strength in that strong vertical that holds a wide horizontal. And you need a strong vertical to hold a strong, big, wide horizontal. If not, something is crooked, something falls. We need to work on both. To end, I want to quote Pamela Wise, who is a teacher in our lineage, who is actually going to be leading an intensive here in May in the city center, from a talk that they gave called Our Woman Ancestors Finding a Way Out of No Way. And Pamela says, we live in two dimensions of being human, which can be called horizontal and vertical. In the horizontal aspect, we move across the surface, getting from here to there. If you look out at the ocean, you can see the surface with all the change and the waves and so on. That's one dimension, and that's useful. It's good to get from here to there. But there's another dimension, which is the vertical. When we drop under the surface, under the churn at the top of the water, and we let ourselves descend down into the still, dark, quiet at the bottom of the ocean. Ultimately, we find a way to do both, to be engaged in horizontal movement, engagement, activity, without losing contact with the depth of our knowing, the depth of our being. So I'm very grateful for this teaching, because it helped me to understand why I'm here today, why it's possible for this Argentinian monk to stand strong in these two aspects of practice, and to be able to receive transmission from my teacher, and eventually offer that transmission, hopefully, to somebody else in the 10 directions. Vertical and horizontal. Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Thank you very, very much.